How the Sahel is rising while France and the EU face collapse, the tables have turned. What if I told you that Africa's most underestimated region, the Sahel, is rising, while the mighty empires of Europe are quietly collapsing? That the same countries once plundered for centuries are now flipping the script, building, uniting, and prospering, while France and the European Union sink into economic chaos and social unrest. This is the story the media doesn't want you to hear. The silent rise of the AES. Let's start with what the mainstream is too afraid to say. The Alliance of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is no longer begging for aid or permission. They've broken ties with ECOWAS. They've rejected neocolonial domination. And they've declared their own bloc, the AES. This alliance isn't just symbolic. It's economic, military, and ideological. These nations are forming joint defense strategies, launching sovereign development initiatives, and realigning with new global partners like Russia, China, Turkey, and even Pan-African investors. Burkina Faso is investing in agriculture and local mining. Niger is moving to control its uranium exports, cutting off France's nuclear energy lifeline. Mali is reclaiming its currency, its gold, and its pride. These countries are creating self-sufficient economies powered by unity and resistance, not by foreign dependency. And they're doing it without the IMF, without the World Bank, and without the EU's development traps. France's fall from grace. Now let's talk about France, the former colonial master of West Africa. For decades, France built its economy on African resources, gold from Burkina Faso, uranium from Niger, oil from Chad, cocoa from Ivory Coast. But those days are over. When Niger cut off uranium exports, France's energy grid felt the shock. That uranium powered 1/3 of France's nuclear reactors. Prices are spiking. Energy insecurity is rising. And worst of all, France has no domestic solution. Meanwhile, inflation is climbing. Public debt has crossed 3 trillion euros. French farmers are protesting. Workers are striking. The middle class is shrinking. Macron's government is trapped between rising public anger and collapsing economic leverage abroad. The Franc-Afrique system, a shadow empire built on African sweat and minerals, is dying. And with it, France's ability to maintain global influence is fading fast. The EU's unraveling. France isn't alone. The European Union is facing its own crisis. The war in Ukraine has drained billions from EU budgets. Energy imports are more expensive than ever. And dependence on African and Middle Eastern raw materials has become a strategic weakness. The EU has lost cheap labor, cheap resources, and geopolitical trust. West Africa no longer trusts Brussels. The Sahel no longer sees Europe as a partner, but as a fading relic of a colonial past. Even the euro is under pressure. As countries around the world ditch Western currencies for gold-backed alternatives, the CFA franc system, long propped up by France and the EU, is collapsing. The AES is openly discussing new sovereign currencies, and that threatens the monetary foundations of France's influence in Africa. Meanwhile, Germany is in recession. Spain is struggling with youth unemployment. Italy's debt-to-GDP ratio is above 140%. And the EU continues to pour billions into NATO expansion and foreign wars, while its own citizens face housing crises, wage stagnation, and social division. AES and the new multipolar world. Here's what's truly revolutionary: the AES isn't rising alone. It's part of a global awakening. Africa is looking east. It's building South-to-South partnerships. It's tapping into BRICS, SCO, and other emerging alliances that don't come with neocolonial strings attached. Russia is offering military support without dictating political terms. China is offering infrastructure, not invasions. Even Turkey is investing in African manufacturing, defense, and culture. What we're witnessing is a seismic power shift. The AES isn't just surviving, it's leading. It's proving that Africa doesn't need to follow the Western model to prosper. It can write its own playbook, grounded in cultural pride, resource control, and regional solidarity. While the EU squabbles over sanctions, identity politics, and border controls, the Sahel is forging a new identity based on sovereignty, self-respect, and survival. The media blackout. So why haven't you heard this on CNN or the BBC? Because this story threatens the status quo. It challenges centuries of European dominance. It dismantles the myth that Africa is helpless without the West. The media calls the AES military juntas, but never tells you why millions of Africans support them. They call it a crisis, but hide the fact that these governments are building schools, hospitals, roads, and dams without French money. The truth is simple, the West needs Africa more than Africa needs the West. And now that Africa is walking away, the empire is collapsing, quietly, chaotically, and inevitably. The AES is rising. The Sahel is awakening. And the former powers of Europe are learning a hard truth: you cannot dominate forever. You cannot steal forever. And you cannot ignore the voice of a continent forever. France is falling. The EU is cracking. And Africa, especially the Sahel, is standing tall. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe the global balance is shifting. Drop a comment: do you support the rise of the Sahel? Is the EU on the edge of collapse? Let your voice be heard.